Good evening, my friends. It is truly an honor to stand in front of you today. When I look out at this room and see faces that carry decades of wisdom, resilience, experience, and love, I don't see decline. I don't see fragility. I see untapped potential. I see biology that is far more powerful than most of you have been led to believe. For those of you who are meeting me for the first time, my name is Dr. Miller. I've spent over 23 years in clinical medicine, specializing in metabolic health, aging physiology, and performance in later life. And if there is one thing I have learned after working with thousands of patients between the ages of 65 and 85, it's this. The human body does not retire at 65. It does not expire at 75. And it certainly does not give up at 85 unless we train it to. I want to begin with a story. Several years ago, a gentleman named Robert walked into my clinic. He was 72 years old, former accountant, quiet, polite shoulders slightly rounded forward. He told me, "Doc, I just want to age gracefully." And I asked him, "What does that mean to you?" He said, "Well, not falling, not needing help to get out of a chair, maybe being able to pick up my granddaughter without throwing out my back." He had already accepted limitation as inevitable. That broke my heart. We ran his tests. His blood sugar was creeping up. His muscle mass had quietly declined. His grip strength, one of the most powerful predictors of longevity, was low. But here was the surprise. His heart was structurally strong. His nervous system was intact. In other words, the foundation was still there. The wiring worked. The machinery was just idle. So I asked him something that shocked him. I said, "Robert, how would you feel about deadlifting?" He laughed. Out loud, he thought I was joking. 3 months later, that 72-year-old man deadlifted 185 pounds safely, under supervision, with perfect form. 6 months later, he carried his granddaughter up a flight of stairs without stopping. 1 year later, he went on a hiking trip he had postponed for a decade. And here is the revelation that changed everything for him. His body had not lost the ability. It had simply lost the stimulus. Tonight, I am going to show you that between the ages of 65 and 85, you can still do 5 surprising tasks that most people, including many physicians, quietly assume are no longer possible. You can build significant muscle. You can dramatically improve balance. You can meaningfully increase bone density. You can sharpen cognitive performance. And yes, you can improve metabolic health to levels that rival people decades younger. And why does this matter more than almost anything your regular doctor has told you? Because independence is not preserved by medication. It is preserved by physiology. And physiology responds to stimulus at every age. So lean forward with me for the next hour, because what I'm about to share may change how you see your own body forever. Now let's talk about the problem. Most people think aging is like rust. Slow, inevitable corrosion. But that metaphor is wrong. Aging, especially between 65 and 85, is more like a city whose power grid is slowly being shut down, not because the power plants are broken, but because fewer neighborhoods are demanding electricity. Your muscles are factories. Your bones are reinforced steel beams. Your brain is a central command center with billions of electrical connections. Your hormones are messengers carrying instructions from one department to another, and all of it runs on demand. Here's what happens quietly. Around your 40s and 50s, muscle protein synthesis, the process of building muscle begins to decline. By 65, many individuals lose between 1 to 2% of muscle mass per year if they are inactive. That condition has a name, sarcopenia. But here's what's critical. Sarcopenia is not purely age-driven. It is disuse-driven. Let me say that again because I want it to land. It is not primarily age. It is primarily inactivity. When you stop challenging muscle, the body says, "We don't need this expensive tissue. Muscle is metabolically costly. It requires calories, oxygen, hormones, so the body economizes. It dismantles unused factories." The same thing happens to bone. Bone is living tissue. It responds to mechanical load. If you stop loading it, meaning you stop lifting, carrying, pushing against gravity, bone density declines. Osteoporosis is not just a calcium problem. It is a mechanical signaling problem. And balance deteriorates. Not because you turn 70, but because the nervous system stops receiving complex input. If you only walk in straight lines on flat surfaces, your brain stops practicing stability under challenge. Insulin sensitivity declines. Mitochondria, the tiny power plants inside your cells, become less efficient. Chronic low-grade inflammation rises. This is often called inflammaging. But again, much of it is modifiable. Now here is where I want to gently wake you up. Most people between 65 and 85 are told to take it easy. They are told to avoid strain. They are prescribed medications for blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar, sometimes necessary, yes, but rarely are they prescribed progressive overload. Rarely are they told that their muscle fibers still contain satellite cells, stem cell-like units capable of regeneration. You have been told to manage decline. You have not been taught to stimulate adaptation. And every day that you sit for long hours, avoid resistance, skip protein at breakfast, and move cautiously without ever challenging your system, the city reduces power allocation. But here is the truth. The power plants are still there. Now let's move into something that most doctors will never explain in detail, the actual science of what happens when a 70-year-old begins challenging their body again. Imagine you perform a simple resistance exercise. Let's say you stand up from a chair repeatedly with added weight. In the first few seconds, your nervous system activates motor units. These are bundles of muscle fibers controlled by a single nerve. As we age, we lose some motor units, yes, but the remaining ones can become more efficient if trained. Within the first 4 hours after that session, muscle fibers experience microscopic tension. This tension activates a pathway called mTOR, mechanistic target of rapamycin. Think of mTOR as a construction foreman. It receives the signal, we need reinforcement. It initiates protein synthesis. Satellite cells wake up. These are like repair crews sitting dormant along muscle fibers. When tension is high enough, they fuse to existing fibers, increasing their capacity. Between 24 and 48 hours later, your body is actively rebuilding. Amino acids from dietary protein become raw materials. If you consume sufficient leucine, an amino acid that acts like a key turning the ignition on muscle synthesis, the rebuilding is stronger. Now here is something extraordinary. Studies have shown that adults in their 70s and even 80s can increase muscle cross-sectional area significantly within 12 to 16 weeks of progressive resistance training. The timeline may be slightly slower than in a 25-year-old, but the machinery works. Let's walk through bone for a moment. When you load bone through impact or resistance, specialized cells called osteocytes detect mechanical strain. They signal osteoblasts to lay down bone matrix. Without strain, osteoclasts dominate and break bone down. So if you never lift anything heavier than a grocery bag, your skeleton assumes you live in a low-gravity environment. It downscales. But if you progressively lift, carry, and challenge your frame, the steel beams thicken. Now let's talk brain. When you challenge coordination, say standing on one leg while reaching, or learning a new movement pattern, the cerebellum and motor cortex increase synaptic efficiency. Neuroplasticity does not end at 60. It slows, but it does not stop. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, increases with exercise. Think of BDNF as fertilizer for neurons. In the hours after a challenging session, blood flow to the hippocampus improves, memory circuits strengthen, and metabolically, when large muscle groups contract, they act like glucose sponges. They pull sugar out of the bloodstream without requiring as much insulin. This improves insulin sensitivity sometimes within weeks. Now here comes the turning point. This is the moment that always gives my patients that look of disbelief. There is a phenomenon called anabolic resistance in aging. It means older muscle requires a slightly stronger stimulus to grow. Most people interpret that as, I can't build muscle. That is not correct. It means the threshold is higher. But when you cross that threshold, when intensity is sufficient, something dramatic happens. Growth hormone pulses increase, testosterone levels, even if modest, become more effective at the receptor level. Inflammatory markers decrease. Mitochondrial biogenesis increases. In other words, once the signal is strong enough, the system does not respond halfway. It responds robustly. Remember our city metaphor? For years, the city has been dimming the lights. But the moment a neighborhood demands full power, repeatedly, the grid recalibrates. I have non-78-year-olds increase leg strength by 40% in 4 months. I have seen 82-year-olds improve bone density scans after structured loading. I have seen reaction times sharpen dramatically. The body is waiting for instruction. Now let's pause and dismantle some myths. Myth number 1, at my age lifting weights is dangerous. This is not only wrong, it is physiologically backwards. Frailty is dangerous. Weakness is dangerous. Supervised, progressive resistance training reduces fall risk more effectively than almost any medication. Myth number 2, muscle loss is inevitable. Some loss occurs, yes, but accelerated loss is optional. Every time I hear someone say it's just aging when what I see is disuse, I have to take a breath because this myth is costing people their independence. Myth number 3, cardio is enough. Walking is wonderful. Please walk. But walking alone does not provide sufficient mechanical tension to reverse sarcopenia. Your bones and fast twitch muscle fibers require more than steady strolling. Myth number 4, it's too late. Let me look you in the eye and say this clearly. It is almost never too late for meaningful improvement between 65 and 85, provided medical conditions are managed appropriately. Now, what does the evidence show? There was a landmark series of trials conducted in older adults. Some participants over 80, where progressive resistance training 3 times per week led to dramatic increases in muscle strength and functional capacity within 10 to 12 weeks. Research from Scandinavia has demonstrated improvements in insulin sensitivity in seniors after resistance training independent of weight loss. In Japan, studies on power training, meaning moving moderate loads quickly under control, showed improvements in reaction time and fall prevention in adults over 75. And in my own clinic, I have watched patients reduce A1C levels by full percentage points, not through starvation diets, but through building muscle. Robert, the gentleman I told you about earlier, reduced his fasting blood sugar by 18 points in 6 months. His bone scan improved slightly after a year. But more importantly, his confidence transformed. Now let me give you something practical, something you can begin immediately. First, protein becomes non-negotiable. Most older adults underconsume protein. I want you aiming for roughly 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight daily, distributed across meals. That means eggs or Greek yogurt at breakfast, not just toast. That means chicken, fish, tofu, or legumes at lunch. That means a solid protein source at dinner. Second, resistance training 2 to 3 times per week. Full body. Squatting or sitting to standing. Pushing movements like wall push-ups progressing to countertop or floor. Pulling movements using bands or light weights. Carrying exercises. Farmer carries with manageable dumbbells. Intensity matters. The last 2 repetitions should feel challenging but controlled. Third, balance practice daily. Stand on one leg while brushing your teeth. Walk heel to toe along a hallway. Challenge the vestibular system safely. Fourth, sleep. Deep sleep is when growth hormone pulses. 7 to 8 hours if possible. Fifth, sunlight and walking outdoors to regulate circadian rhythm and support bone through mild impact. In the first week, you begin gently. Learn form. Focus on consistency. By week 4, you should feel stronger. By week 8, measurable changes often appear. Now, who should be cautious? If you have unstable cardiovascular disease, severe uncontrolled hypertension, advanced osteoporosis with high fracture risk, recent surgery, or severe joint degeneration, you must work with a professional. If you are on medications that affect balance or blood pressure, adjustments may be needed. If you have been completely sedentary for years, start slowly. There is no glory in injury. The goal is adaptation, not heroics. And please, if you are under extreme psychological stress or severe sleep deprivation, address those foundations first. Recovery capacity matters, but for the vast majority of adults between 65 and 85, progressive challenge under guidance is not only safe, it is life-altering. I want to close by returning to Robert. 2 years after that first visit, he sent me a photograph. He was standing at the top of a hiking trail, granddaughter on his shoulders, smiling in a way I had never seen in my clinic. He wrote, "I didn't age gracefully. I aged powerfully. Your body was not designed for passive decline. It was designed for adaptation, for challenge, for resilience. Aging is not the closing of the factory. It is the dimming of unused lights. Turn them back on, and remember this sentence long after you leave here tonight. Your biology does not retire unless you stop giving it a reason to stay strong." Thank you. I would love to hear your questions, and I want to know how many of you are ready to surprise yourselves in the next 90 days.